This is the Persistence of Vision podcast. Hi, this is Clint. Welcome in. For this month's episode of the podcast, I have a very special guest, writer and director Joshua Caldwell. This is a filmmaker that I was first introduced to on Substack. I really liked the things that he was writing, the stories he was sharing, and so I reached out and asked if he would come on this month to talk a little bit about his experiences and some of the insights and things that he's learned through his career as a filmmaker. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I mean, I had a great time listening and talking with Joshua. For those of you that don't know, Joshua is the founder of the SixK Filmmaker course at sixkfilmmaker.com, where he provides all of these lessons about how you can create your own feature with a minimal budget, just to get it out there, to get it in front of the right people, to help launch your career as a filmmaker. And so he gets the chance to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about the things that he overcame, creative solutions to problems that he had while producing his feature films. And I think it's going to be a great, great episode. So this is my conversation with writer-director Joshua Caldwell. Joshua, thanks for coming on Persistence of Vision this month. I'm so excited to get the chance to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure, yeah. So let's start off, just introduce yourself for us.
Yeah, my name is Joshua Caldwell. I'm a director, producer, writer. I'm, probably on almost year 20 of my filmmaking journey. Made 5 features, did a series for Hulu. Latest film was Mending the Line, which came out on Netflix last year and hit #1 the week of its release. And have managed to carve a career despite the challenges that have been put in front of me with Hollywood and everything like that.
So just for the listener, I first got introduced to Joshua through Substack, just reading his work there, which, you'll definitely want to check out, and we'll be sure to plug that by the end of the episode today. But there was one story in particular, and I'm going to tease it now. No, I don't want to get into it now. I want to get into it later, because when I first reached out to you, it was the story that I read about your experiences shooting in the desert and running afoul of some government agents or government employees, let's say. So I'm gonna just we'll put a pin in that story.
Yep.
And come back to that later. But I just like to get a sense maybe of all of my guests, kind of where they got started, a little bit of your background, and maybe what first got you interested in film production.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and my dad was a lover of movies. We'd go see movies. I mean, I'm a product of sort of the 80s VHS revolution, right? I mean, the ability to now watch movies at home was huge, and just got to see a ton of different stuff. And in addition to that, my dad often would take us to see movies, take my brother and I to see movies. And what started to sort of click for me was this idea. I had no concept of a camera and directors and anything like that. I saw a desire to sort of live in the world of whatever movie I was sort of seeing, So I'd see the movie, and then I'd get my neighborhood kids together, neighborhood friends, and we'd play act the film, So we did stuff like Robin Hood and Batman and, Newsies and all kinds of whatever was coming out, and of course I realized now at the time I was directing, I was getting everybody together and organizing this whole thing. I never had an interest in acting. My sort of purpose, or my intention with the play acting, was more about the character and living in the world than it was about performing a certain character. I wasn't playing Batman. I was Batman. Right. And so that kind of just got me, the movies and stuff like that, and the world building was really enthralling at that time. And but it wasn't until I was in kind of middle school that the idea of movie making even started to appear, in my own thinking. And a lot of it was due to a series I saw on Discovery Channel called Movie Magic, which basically every week, and this was cable, so no, you couldn't stream it. You had to see it when it was on, and I would try and see it when I would try to figure out when it was on, and then I would videotape, I would record it on a VHS so I could watch it later. But it was this really cool show where they took you behind all the special effects of movies. So one episode would be about model making, another episode would be about miniatures, another episode about animatronics, another episode about, you know, um, makeup, like whatever that was. And it was a behind the scenes peek at Jurassic Park and Terminator 2 and all these really cool movies. And that got me sort of into it, this sort of special effects world of it, right? And and then really, like, in high school, turns out we had a production class that was a 2 period a day deal. And so, I took that my junior, senior year and got to spend a lot of time making movies with digital cameras and Avid editing systems and all that kind of stuff, and learning the technical process of actually making a film or a documentary or whatever it was we were doing. But then a really cool thing at my school too was that we had this, like, kind of, history of making these parody films for the student body, leadership, and they would make parody films based on whatever film was hot and popular at the time, and they would show them to the entire school. And I had a buddy of mine that started doing that, and I just said, "I've gotta be involved. I'll do whatever. I'll help you in any way I can. I just wanna do that." And eventually worked my way up to being the guy that made that. We called it the media czar, and, made like 4 films. We did a Usual Suspects parody, we did a Snatch parody, we did a soap opera, and then my sort of final, the grand finale of my time there was we made an hour-long Star Wars movie. And, they're terrible. I usually post the Star Wars movie every May 4th, but or that I post the trailer. But, it was, like, great because we had no money. We could go make a movie, but we had an audience. We were gonna show it to the entire school. So, like, we had kind of a reason for making it, and we got to have a lot of fun doing it. And, that was where my sort of love of filmmaking really kickstarted, and it really made me go, "This is what I wanna be doing."
Yeah, there are so many similarities, I think, between what you're saying, and I think anybody that has a love for, film and filmmaking. Because for me, it was my dad's VHS camcorder, and my big things were Indiana Jones and James Bond.
Mhm.
My friends and I would make Indiana Jones movie, we made 2 James Bond movies, and we'd show them to friends and get together and have a nice premiere with suits and ties and dresses and stuff like that, and I tell you what, I avoided writing a lot of book reports in school by asking the teacher if I could simply make a movie
Yep.
version out of whatever play we were studying or whatever book we were doing. So, but yeah, you're braver than I am when it comes to posting your Star Wars trailer online, because all the stuff that I did back then, I'm so glad it's in the vault, because if I had YouTube when I was in middle school, it would have I would never live that down today. It would just be,
I
really, really
mean, yeah.
embarrassing.
I mean, maybe it's only because I feel more secure in what I've been doing, but, like, nobody that's not a basis on which somebody can judge your,
True,
your
yeah.
work, the high 8 shot, video. Like, I mean, it's just like, it's just fun. It's like, it's so bad that it's hilarious. And that's what makes it really enjoyable, to do is like there's really no
Mhm.
pressure. And it's almost impossible to get it in anywhere close to a real film,
Yeah.
so you sort of accept it as what it is. And I mean, we're walking around wearing karate, uniforms and spats on the boots because you can't get real boots because they cost too much. But the whole premise of it was we had no money. So you just had to sort of figure it out. I mean, it's insane that we did it, but we're up like at our school launching fireworks and,
Mhm.
exploding little things to make it look like laser blasters are coming through. And then we're adding the laser later and doing the Star Wars fights. And we're there till 3 in the morning shooting all this stuff. I mean, but it's just me. It's me and the 4 other ASB officers trying to do this huge thing.
When you're talking about effects, made me think about when I was in high school and we had to read Julius Caesar. One of my early claim to fame filmmaker moments was when we had the ghost after Caesar is killed. Caesar's ghost comes back to haunt Cassius or Brutus, and we shot the scene through angled plexiglass, and
Nice.
had the actor that was playing this ghost of Caesar to the right of camera, and we lit him from behind camera, so his reflection appeared next to the guy that was playing
Yeah.
Brutus or Cassius or whatever, so it looked like he's kind of hovering there, and
Nice.
we thought we had just made it in terms
Oh,
of
yeah.
VFX work. So, once you kinda got out and started your career then, what was maybe, like, the first big lesson or the first big teachable moment? 'Cause, it doesn't have to be major, like, I think back to when I was first a PA on a set, and somebody said, "Clint, go grab such and such off the grip truck." And I was like, "Yes, sir," "Here we go,"
Mhm.
and I run over to the truck because I wanted to be eager and show them that I knew what I was doing, and then didn't even know what a combo stand was.
Right.
So
Right.
I'd get over to the truck and be like, uh-oh. So, from those little experiences, I kinda learned early on, okay, they know I'm green, they know I'm learning, so don't be afraid to ask the dumb questions, right? So,
Yeah.
was there like a teachable moment that you had maybe from a mentor, some experience where you just were kinda thrown into it and learned something along the way?
In my senior year of college, at the very end of my senior year of college, I got nominated for and ended up winning an MTV Movie Award. They had a contest for MTVU, which was sort of their college closed circuit college network, and they would do contests from time to time. And so basically, MTVU put out a contest and submitted a film, and I got nominated. I was one of five, and they got to go to the award show and was handed a golden popcorn by Zach Braff, which was super cool. Literally 2 days after graduating college, I'm on stage at Sony Studios getting this award. And I thought I was, like, being handed a golden key. I was like, "This is massive. My career is starting. This is amazing," right? And I started getting calls from management companies and, like, things like that who had interest. But basically, after I won, I totally thought that, like, this is valuable in some way. Turns out it wasn't. So nobody really cared or was paying attention. Found out nobody watches the MTV Movie Awards because other than people, other than if you're in the industry, you don't care about that. And and felt very frustrated by the fact that like I'd won this kind of popularity contest, which is what it was. It was all through voting. And that it didn't really turn into anything. And it took me a little while before I sort of saw the lesson in all of it, which was, all right, doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter, what you've made, what award you've won, like nobody is gonna come and help you. You can't be sitting there waiting for somebody else to make it happen for you. Like if it's gonna happen, you've really got to be the one to do it. And that's gonna come through either networking yourself or whatever. It's just getting out there. Like simply making a short, putting it online, sitting on the couch waiting for a phone call isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, it it reminds me I'm a huge Simpsons fan, and it kinda reminds me of a great moment where, Ron Howard is a guest star on an episode, and he's pitching a new film idea to Brian Grazer, and he isn't buying what Ron Howard's putting out there, but then he ends up going with an idea Homer had given him earlier in the episode. Brian Grazer's like, "This is fantastic. Congrats, Ron, you've done it again," and just hands him a big bag of money to end the episode,
Right.
and you think, like you're saying, you think, "Oh, man, that would be so great to just pitch an idea to some executive and just say, 'Hey, trust me, it's gonna be great,' and that individual hands you a big bag of
Right.
money and says, 'Go make it.'"
Yeah. Which does happen, but you just can't rely on it.
When you were then just kinda hustling, like you said, and doing music videos and other things, were you just doing that as an independent video producer, freelancer, or did you set up a company at that time, or what were you doing?
Well, I always had a production company. I started my production company in high school. Um, just because I like the idea of it, and I wanted something at the beginning of my films with the logo and all that fun stuff, and so I've always had a company. But really, yeah, I mean, just as a freelance director, but the tough thing was I PA'd a couple times, and I realized I just have zero interest in being a PA. I'm not learning much, and there's no like path to go from PA to director. And so it was me basically starting to sit down and say, well, what I really want to do is write and direct. What I really want to do is direct features, and the easiest way to start doing that is to write features. So started writing features with a partner, and then in addition to that, realized that, look, maybe I never get a shot to direct. I still want to work in this industry. So maybe I should find a job, you know, that's working for a production company or an agency or something like that. Cause I just love being around movies and I think it'd be cool to like be involved. And I'd rather be doing that and work in retail, which is what I'm doing now. So not now, but at that time. And so, started, in addition to writing, started taking internships and eventually landed an internship with Anthony Zeiker, who created CSI, and came into his company in a very unique situation. He'd come up with this concept of a digi novel, which was like you would read part of a chapter of a book, and then it would tell you to go online and watch a filmed chapter of the next thing, which at the time was the first incarnation of it was very clunky because you couldn't be reading on a plane and then go on your laptop and watch it. Um, Once the iPad came out, totally changed everything. But anyway, he was doing a lot of experimental stuff in digital, and we ended up partnering with a guy named Tony Valenzuela, who founded a YouTube channel called Black Box TV, and we started producing like horror shorts and thriller and sci-fi shorts in conjunction with him. And I got to be heavily involved in that, producing, directing, all this kind of stuff. So like that was really like the first kind of like, oh, okay, here's a step in the right direction. Um, where I could sort of conceivably see how this could turn into a career. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
still writing, still setting projects up, but they were really not going anywhere. And I was getting really itchy to make a feature. So I started to think that I wanted to make a feature before I turned 30. Like I said, I was writing with a partner and writing good scripts, but like, there was bigger budgets than I could afford or I could get. So I started getting itchy. And it was around this time, two things happened. I started doing work with, on Anthony's side, um, going back a little, he had made the first incarnation of this digi novel, and they had shot on the red. And looking at the footage, I could tell that they ran out of time and that all of a sudden they were shooting 3 shots and a couple takes per scene and moving on. It doesn't really work, right? It's too simple, and you're missing an opportunity to do something really dramatic and stylistic. So when it came time to do the second version of it, I suggested that we shoot on the 5D. And we did. We were able to shoot 2 cameras. We were all over the place. We didn't have to light forever. Like we shot basically like a ton of stuff and it really dynamic looking and really cool looking. And Anthony was really thrilled. Um, so I started to see the power of this camera, that could see in the dark, give you a cinematic like image with the lenses you were using. And I just started to think like we should use this for something. The other thing that sort of clicked for me was I started seeing these articles about how Ed Burns was making these 100,000 or $10,000 films. He's shooting on a 5D and just making things for like no money. And I was like, I could probably get $10,000 together. Maybe that's just what I need to do. And if I use this 5D, I can, shortcut all these production requirements that you need for bigger cameras and all this other stuff. And let's just go make a movie and let's see if we can do it. But I need an idea. And the third thing that really happened was at some point, don't know where it came from, but I had this idea of a woman stuck on a layover. And I said, you know what? I think this could be the idea. It's one night in LA. We'll approach it like French New Wave does, where you do a lot of your dialogue scenes inside, where you're in controlled environments, and then when we're out on the street, we do more of the action. And everything kind of started to come together, and I said, "I think this is it." So I'm going to sit down and write it. I wrote the first draft in about 2 weeks, and it just kind of flowed out of me. And I said, "I think this could be it, and this could be that $10,000 feature." And so we ended up getting 6, but it was enough to make the film.
So with something like that, kind of just run and gun with a small camera like the 5D, small budget. I'm sure there were moments of maybe self-doubt at some point through the process. I know that, I've just done short films. I have not done feature films. And even with my short films, there's that moment that I always have of self-doubt of thinking, "Oh man, I can't pull this off. This isn't going to come together like I thought." So I was just curious if there's something like that with Layover where you thought of in the moment, whether it's during the production or even in post, where you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, I just don't know how this is going to come together," and maybe how you kind of work through that.
Um, even up through finishing it, it just felt like, oh, this feels like a really interesting movie. The only moment of doubt was more that like I just felt like it was a pretty gritty looking movie. I felt like, man, this is like it's very handheld, but turns out a lot of people really thought it was a very beautiful looking film. So, and I can see that, like I understand it, but there were just a couple scenes where I was like, man, this is like pretty rough, and raw. Um, but, like, we kind of, avoided a lot of the traps that sort of 5D filmmakers had fallen into, where they were shooting, like, wide open on a 1.2 lens, and everything except the nose is out of focus. Like, we shot on the 24 to 105 f4, which was the reason we chose that lens was because it was image stabilized. So we sacrificed, being able to open up, further for the stabilization because it was literally the camera body and the lens. There was no handheld rig. There was no other monitor or anything like that. It was just that literally just the camera and the lens. And so I needed that stability because my hand shakes. I operated my hand shakes, a little bit. And I didn't want to see that because I tested it. And and so, that kind of allowed us to have a little bit more of a cinematic look where you're still getting depth of field, but it's not so aggressive. Which I think ended up becoming that sort of 5D look that a lot of people ended up hating because like the point is not to open up to a 1.0 or a 1.2. The point is to boost that ISO to get yourself better. So, and I just kind of thought, hey, I think there's a way to make this movie that doesn't require all the people and all the production, equipment and all the stuff that you would normally need to make a film and make something that is emotionally compelling and connects with your audience. And I think Layover does that. We did some lighting, but it was very minimal, and a lot of times it was using practicals. And so, like, usually when we got to places, we were up and shooting really quickly. And as a result, we shot a lot of takes. We were able to do a lot of, we were just able to like let it go, let the actors perform. Let's just do it again and again and again. And then when we feel like we've got a couple of really good ones, then we'll move on. But like the result was I had a lot to choose from in post, like in the editing. We had a lot of different takes we could pull from to really shape and get the best performances we could, but it was really remarkable what we could do with the very, very little equipment that we ended up having.
I know you wrote about, filming in the nightclub and how you pulled that off, and I was thinking as I read that post, just about limitations that come with time, access, budget, crew, gear, whatever, and you had a pretty creative solution to filming a scene in that nightclub where you had to have some creativity in the way you staged your talent.
Yeah.
So that story that you wrote might be the answer to this question, but just any other limitations or things that you came across during that production that you found creative solutions to, based on those constraints?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think like, the solution we ended up coming up with was one of our producers knew somebody in a nightclub who basically what we said was, we want to come in. We're just bringing a camera and a couple of actors. We're not bringing lights. We're not bringing anything else. And we just want to shoot some footage of them in the nightclub. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. Just don't be shooting guests. And we're like, yeah, no, don't worry about it. So knowing the limitations of the nightclub and the fact that we weren't going to be able to record dialogue and we weren't going to be able to do all this stuff, I wrote a scene that didn't require any of that. I think there's one line in there that we ended up ADRing because like, it was pretty simple and we didn't need much to it, but I knew that it was all going to be action based. So I started there and said, I'm going to write a simple scene where the story's happening as a result of the action. Right. Um, and to your point, one of the things was we needed a moment where Simone, our lead character, sees her friend who has taken her out, who's married, making out with another guy. So we needed to kind of see them, and the club's dark. So we got to the club a little bit early, and what we ended up doing was we ended up using all the other girls and all the crew that was with us, and we shot that scene in kind of the lobby area, and we sort of lined up for, 3 or 4 people on each side, sort of back to back, and then put, our subject at the end of it. And then when we flipped around, put our lead in the other end. And I just zoomed in as far as I could on that lens and had everybody sort of backing up into each other as they did it. And then like, we shot it a couple times and that was it. So if you look, the wide shot is just 2 rows of people dancing their backs to each other with nobody else, you know, and nothing else really happening. And then, yeah, we had our guy kind of above just swinging a light, you know, handheld. Um, and so we're super tight. We need to be super tight at that moment. We don't need to see the big club. And that was the way we were able to accomplish that. Another sort of problematic scene that we needed a solution to was the lookout scene. So there's a scene in the middle of the movie where Simone and the motorcyclist, as we've come to know him, um, they kind of escape this house party, and he takes her up and shows her this view of LA. It's a really beautiful view. And we shot up on the lookout above. I looked at a ton of different lookouts, and I shot up on this lookout above the Hollywood Bowl. And I knew that was the lookout I wanted to use. So they usually, it was supposed to close after sundown, but usually it'd be an hour after that before anybody came and locked the gate. The problem was that it was also a very popular lookout, and there was not never a night there when there weren't other people. And so I was like, okay, I've got this like 8-page dialogue scene. Well, we can't do that, but I want this vista. So what am I going to do? So what we ended up doing was we ended up going on the night that we decided to go up, and we planned to only shoot from the back. So we had our actors mic'd, we had a boom mic on them, and I said, "Listen, just perform the scene 3 times." So they did the scene 3 times, and I shot a wide, I shot long lens close-ups, panning back and forth, I got medium, right? I got everything from behind of this beautiful image of them in silhouette. Meanwhile, in the raw footage, I talk about this in the course, but in the raw footage, like, you see flashes going off, people are talking in the background, like, it's like a party up there. But I was never gonna use any of that dialogue, it was only for reference, and I could always cut out because I was never gonna just stay on the shot from the behind. So then what we did was we knew we needed to find another location that sort of could work for this. So we ended up finding a backyard of a friend up in the hills that we knew was gonna be quiet, and it had kind of this ivy wall behind them, and we basically went up there, and I lit sort of them from the front with this China ball, really dim China ball, and I shot all the front stuff. And so this really intimate, vulnerable conversation happens where, and it's perfectly quiet, and it's just and then you intercut that with the other stuff, and it feels like, that's how you shot it. And so, it's stuff like that, just being creative with your shots and reverse shots and things like that became the mantra in making that film.
And so, how soon after, like, obviously, 6K Filmmaker, the course that you have, obviously is inspired by Layover since you had a $6,000 budget. So, I've always enjoyed kind of mentoring, people. I've had the chance to work with local youth that are interested in filmmaking to kind of show them some things that you're describing. So, tell me a little bit about the 6K Filmmaker course, but specifically, like, for those that are listening that are interested in filmmaking, um, specifically, like, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see from people that are just starting out or just getting into filmmaking, things that they're trying to do, but just aren't approaching it the right way?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the first part with the
Yeah.
course. So, you know, every podcast I do, everybody I talk to that knows I did Layover and did it for 6 grand, they always want to know how. And I thought that nobody really ever teaches you how to make like a no budget film, in the right in a way that isn't two people in one room. Like, you're not taught that in film school. Nobody makes that stuff in Hollywood. And yet here I am making this $6,000 movie that ended up sort of launching my career. So I'm like, maybe there's something in this, and maybe I should think about putting a course together that sort of teaches this, because I don't see anybody else talking about the approach that we took in Layover, and that I took with my third film, Negative, which I made for $100,000, but applied a lot of the same principles, um, and stuff that I apply to the bigger budget films that I do now. So that's really where that came from, was like, I think that there's an opportunity to sort of, have a niche in this filmmaking world. And I've got the goods to back it up. I've got the movies, I've got the career that can kind of say, yeah, like, this ended up working. It's not a guarantee, but it is possible. And you just got to do it this way. So I think that, like, for me, the mistakes that people make, it's uh writing something that I think a lot of it starts with the writing, and it's writing something that ends up being specific enough that you can't not spend money to execute it. So the approach that I teach in the course is kind of this, I call it modular storytelling. And the idea behind that is that when you write your script and you write your scenes, you are writing them in such a way that they can be produced no matter what your budget is, whether you have $0 or whether you have $3 million. The fundamental story being told in that scene does not change, depending on what other ways you can elevate it, right? Whether that's the camera you're using, whether it's the location, whatever. So everything like in Layover is incredibly generic. The club is described generically. It's a club. The house party is a house party. It's like it's never specific enough, and it's never written into the text of the script that you have to now execute it that way. And I'll give you the example. So after doing Layover, I directed a show called South Beach for Hulu, and I remember that we were working on it, and we were talking to the producer. He's like, "Why is this like? You just made a movie for $6 grand. Like, why is this costing so much money?" And I said, "Because you have written a story about rich people, and that is ingrained in the DNA of your script." Like, you describe this record exec as one of the most successful record execs in Miami. He cannot be in a windowless basement office, right? You need to convince the audience that he is a successful thing, and you need to see that on camera. You can't describe in the text of your document, meaning dialogue, that this person runs the hottest club in Miami and see that club filled with 3 extras. Your audience will tune out. So, like, when you write out characters that are spies or military or like whatever, there's a certain level of expectation from the audience that you are going to deliver on the promise of that, character or description in the script. So, like, I tell you to just stay away from it and allow these scenes to be told via the dialogue and the character interaction, and not have it be reliant on anything that you don't really have control over or is going to cost you money to go and get. Um, so that's another thing. I think another example is like people thinking too small. People often constrain the production, and what they do is they limit what they can put on screen, but they expand what's happening behind the scenes. So they go big on crew and they hire a full crew, but then they limit the scope of the film and the story that they're telling, right? It's yeah, you made a professional looking 2 people, 1 room film and you had a crew of 40, but none of that money's on screen. It's all paid to your crew, which I have nothing against. I love crew, you should definitely hire them, but there is a way to make movies with a very, very minimal crew. Um, and one of the things I encourage people in the course, if they're thinking about making, a 6K type film, is to find ways to get your characters out of the world, but do so in a way that you can very easily shoot. And the sort of second thing I teach in the course is called live environment filmmaking. Live environment filmmaking is where you step into a location that you have no control over, and you basically shoot your scene or get your shot and then move on. A really great example of this is Tangerine by Sean Baker. So they did get permits for that block of Santa Monica, but they did not have any control over pedestrians. So they would just set up and they would shoot whatever was there, right? And they would make use of whatever happens. And so the result of that film, of Layover, of other movies I've done, is there's now a suddenly much bigger feeling film, right? Because everybody then assumes you paid to have all those extras or paid to lock down that location. Because if you're making a 6K film, you are making it for people in Hollywood to watch so that they can hire you to direct. You are not making it for audiences, because no audience is going to watch your movie. It's not why you're making it. Because even if you do get it on Amazon, do get it on Netflix, how is it being promoted? Right? And nobody in Hollywood is looking at new films on Netflix and Amazon to figure out who they should hire. But basically, that's probably the third mistake that I would say, um, is in addition to live environment filmmaking, is not sort of marketing your film in the right way. And what I mean by that is you are targeting distribution, uh, that is frankly limited and digital based and is filled with millions of other films like yours. So how are you standing out? Well, you got to market to the people that are going to hire you to do your next film. And so you need to target them. And I talk about how to do that in the course as well.
Yeah, that's all, man, all fantastic points. Like I thought that last one specifically is great about why you're making the feature that you're making.
I
You
have
know,
so many people that, like, when we started the course, they would be like, "Well, I don't understand because I like I made a feature, came out on Amazon, and nothing happened." I'm like, "Because nobody, you are not benefiting from Joe Schmo in Oklahoma watching your film."
Mhm.
And they think that's what it is, but it's not. Like, we self-distributed Layover. We put it out ourselves on Gumroad, and it was only a year or so after we did that, that a distributor came on and said, "Hey, I'd love to, like, just put it on iTunes for you and get it out there." And we said, "Oh, great." But, like, we weren't even on iTunes. We were literally like we were a Vimeo rental, and you could buy it and download it for free on Gumroad. And, and so, but why did that why did that get me my next movie? Was because we targeted the marketing towards people in Hollywood. We targeted trades, and we targeted people that we knew would be spreading the word about a $6,000 movie to people who would be impressed by the fact that we made it for $6,000 and want to meet with me to find out how. You are after a person or a company that's going to hire you to make your next movie.
and so as you transitioned into bigger and bigger projects, larger budgets, you're getting to work with some name actors. You're doing more things. How how was your mental attitude, your mental state kinda going into that? Did you find it intimidating? Was it a big kind of a culture shift for you as a director coming from kind of this lean, mean production into this bigger world?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I never, I've always been very confident, on set. I really do feel like when I'm on set, I am in my element, and it's what I was born to do, so to speak. So I feel very comfortable in that space, with a lot of people, they try directing and they're like, "Oh, it's not for me." It's like the questions you get, it's endless, the pressure, the stress. I thrive in those situations. I love it. Like I love problem solving. I love, figuring out how do we get this done with the time we have and the delays and like whatever that is, like I really, really love it. So I very much feel like I'm in my element when we're doing it. The biggest challenge for me has been to find that often the reason we're making the movie is maybe not to make the best movie that we can make. And what I mean by that is we're often, the sort of challenge that's related to that is the fact that, oddly enough, as your budget gets higher, you have fewer days to make the film because now everything's so expensive and you're paying a big crew and you're paying for trucks, you don't get tons and tons of days. So like when I made Layover in 11 days, that's not really a great example of like, you know, making a film. I never want to make a film in 11, 12 days again. And I've done it twice. So my third film, I set out to make this feature called Negative, and I wanted to do Layover, but amped up. And I wanted to do it for a bigger budget and do a spy thriller and have some action and gunfights and the stuff, more of what I kind of really wanted to do. And we had $100,000 budget on that film, $75,000 for production. 80% of that movie was shot by me and two or three other people on the crew. Um, Most of it's the two lead actors, and we shot for 37 days over the course of like 4 months, and that was like amazing, because you could kind of just take your time and really get it right. And then I did, Infamous in 21 days, and I did Mending the Line in 23 days. And so, back to sort of that quick thing, but I sort of figured out what steps I needed to take throughout prep and into production to allow for what I really wanted was time with the actors getting takes.
So, was there a time where, in all of your experiences, this has just been fascinating to chat with you, uh, just where things went wrong perhaps, or things happened that you didn't expect, but then ultimately led to a better outcome or led to an unexpected outcome that kinda served the film better than you anticipated it would?
Um, so there's one example. So in Infamous, um, we have a number of single takes that we did, oneers, big long oneers. And, in particular, there's one that takes place during a shootout, where our lead characters are in the car, they're trying to get away, they get tracked down and chased by cops, and there's a shootout, and then they are able to get away, and then there's dialogue in the car. As scripted, originally conceived and scripted, that was not a oneer, and it was set at night, which is, like, ridiculous, but when you're writing, like, whatever. Um And I remember just having conversations with my DP, and that scene in particular just kept cropping up, which is like, okay, there's a lot to do, and I don't think we can shoot at night because like what road is going to give us the amount of we don't have that lighting capability. I said, okay, well, we could definitely switch it to daytime, maybe make it dawn or something like that. But the other aspect of it was, how do we shoot all of this in the time that we have available? Because it's still a very short shoot. What we ultimately decided was rather than trying to shoot this piecemeal, let's shoot it as a oneer. And we started doing a lot of other oneers on Infamous as well. And so, but this one in particular became a really interesting oneer. And we just said, well, what if we're just in the car the entire time with them? And that worked sort of stylistically with the type of movie we wanted to make because I wanted to make something that had the look of like an Instagram filter, but had the sort of camera work of like this day in the life vlog, you know, um, sort of gonzo type of like YouTube style, right? Social media stuff where, a lot of social media stuff is not edited. It's shot live as one single take. So that I wanted to key into the language of what the movie was about because it's about social media influencers who become famous as a result of robbing people. Um, and so it was not only a stylistic choice to sort of fit within the film, but it was also like a production choice because now we don't have to show every single little moment of this, and we can sort of get a lot more freedom to not show and let it play off screen, which saves our VFX budget. It saves all the time because, yeah, you might have to spend half the day rehearsing. But then once you start shooting, once you've got it, you've got it. So in that case, we did 9 takes. And the scene in the film is the ninth take. Um, and the end result is we were done in 3/4 of a day.
Amazing. Joshua, I could sit and chat with you about all this stuff for hours, but you've been incredibly gracious with your time. This is all super informative, but I did put a pin in that story from
Yes.
earlier that I wanted to get back to before we close out. So just in terms of like things that go wrong and on-set nightmare stories that everybody loves, this is the story that I read on your Substack that kind of introduced me to you and your world. So
Yeah.
I gotta give you the floor again to kinda tell us this story because it's great.
Yeah, yeah. So like, going back to high school, all this stuff's related. The idea of like I'm a filmmaker that likes to just go do it. You don't have permission, you don't have permits, like just go film. You can deal with the consequences later, and the consequences are never that bad. So, I'm just like a go for it type of guy. And I was working on a project. We were shooting a trailer. We were shooting like a teaser trailer for a feature idea that we had. And the teaser trailer was sort of supposed to be the film took place in like the African desert. And we're in LA, so we're going, okay, let's try and where can we go shoot that's desert like, that can sort of fit this story and have it make sense. So I start researching kind of like dry lake bed areas up in like the Palmdale, northern Bakersfield, whatever area of LA, north of LA. And I find this kind of dry lake bed that appears to be in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, there's a road there, but that looks like that might be a dirt road. Like it just looks like you're in the middle of the desert. I was like, that's where we should go. So at the beginning of the day, we shot a couple of scenes. Um, up just a little bit outside of LA. I mean, like funny enough, we shot in this like lake or this riverbed where that was made famous in Chinatown. It's the one where he sees the kid on the horse. And I always loved that location with the bridge. And I said, well, let's go shoot up there because that's actually a little bit of a river. And we needed a river. We needed flowing water for this particular scene. So I shot everything. We were shooting on the 5D. And then we moved off to this dry lake bed. And we get up to the dry lake bed. And I'm like, all right, this is like kind of a busier road than I thought it would be. But whatever, let's just get out and shoot. So we get out and we shoot the scenes that we need to shoot, which is really just kind of walking stuff. It's nothing really like big. And we get a bunch of different angles of it and that stuff. And then we pull out the buddy I was making it with, he had at the time, he was like the DJI drone, but the original Inspire, not at the Inspire. What was it? The original, the OG, where it had the GoPro mounted on it. And we shot some drone stuff. And we were like, okay, that's cool. And then finally I was like, okay, we've gotten everything, but I had, for an earlier scene, rented this 600 millimeter lens. So I was like, let's get some like cool shots of them on the lake bed with the heat rising. And like, let's just do that for the fun of it. So we do. And I'm out getting this shot. Actors are out on the lake bed. And I saw, as we were kind of setting up the shot, I saw like a police go by, like siren on, lights on. And I was like, okay, just, I clocked it. And of course we're pulled over. I mean, you can see us from the road, it's like we're there. And I start shooting. And then all of a sudden, this police car comes back and pulls over. And the producer who I was doing this with, I said, go check out what's going on. And while he does that, I just said, hey, just start walking. And they start walking. And I shoot some of it. All of a sudden my producer comes over. He's like, hey, just everybody stop what you're doing. And behind him is a cop, but not a cop I've ever seen. He's like green and all this, like, it does not look right. Turns out he's a cop from the Andrews Air Force Base. And apparently we are on Air Force Base property, which is news to me because when I looked up this place on Google, I saw the Air Force Base very clearly on the map, and nowhere did it indicate that we were on base property in any way. And he's like, do you guys know that you're on base property? And I'm like, no. He's like, you didn't see the big ass sign, like as you drove on this road? We're like, no. And he's like, well, what are you guys doing out here? And we're like, okay, well, we're just filming this like student film. We didn't listen. I'm like, we didn't know. Like, obviously we would not be here if we knew this was Air Force Base property, but it doesn't look good. Yeah. Fortunately, he didn't see the drone, but like, I've got a big ass lens on this camera. I mean, it's like you could be a spy. And so he's like, well, you guys we need to see your identification, and pulls us back over to the car. Meanwhile, a couple other cops show up. And now it's turning into a thing. And one of our actors doesn't have ID on him. And they're like, why don't you have ID? And he's like, well, you're not required to carry ID. And he's like, yeah, but you are on base. And we're like, we were not aware that we're on base. And they're trying to figure out what they want to do with us. And what we're hearing is that they're going to take us in to the Air Force Base and book us basically. And I'm just like, great. Turns out their supervisor was out to lunch, and they were like, all right, they come back over and they're like, here's the deal. We're going to escort you off the base. We don't want you to ever come back. If you ever do come back, we will, we'll charge you with federal trespassing, and you need to show us what you shot and wipe the card. And I said, okay. So I show them what we shot, and I delete the card, and I show them it's deleted. And we all get back in the van, and they're like, what happened? And we're like, just get back in the van. So we're all back in the van. And so we keep going for a while. And they were like, so what happened to the footage? I'm like, well, I swapped the cards. And this is the Ocean's 11 flashback. So flashback to me when the cop's pulling up, I take the card out of the camera, put it into my sock, and take a new card, put it in, and then, all right, guys, and I start rolling. And so basically I get a bunch of footage of them, which looked gorgeous. It sucks I had to delete it, but that was my burn card. And so my biggest worry was they were going to search us and find the card in my sock, which was not going to look good. But yeah, basically I saved all the footage from it, except for the last couple shots, which we didn't need for the for the trailer anyway. And then basically like, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that. And I'm like, yeah. And then basically cut to our car driving past this big ass sign that says, welcome to Edwards Air Force Base.
That that cracked me up when I read it and just cracked me up again when you're retelling it,
Yeah.
and just how cinematic that story is in that moment of the reveal
Yeah.
in the car that you had swapped the cards
Right.
just gets me every time.
And,
And
yeah, I mean, it was definitely quick thinking, but, it's a fun story, and it's more fun because I did not get charged with federal trespassing. So, but yeah, I
yeah.
mean, that's the craziest one I've ever had. I remember really quick once in college, we were up filming a scene in Harlem, and we were filming a fight scene, and we had permits and everything, and, cops came by, and they were like, "Yeah, somebody said you guys there was a fight going on here," and he's like, "But you're clearly making a movie, so, just be careful." And I said, "Do you need our permit?" He's like, "No." It's like, that was it. So, I've been lucky where I haven't had anything really crazy happen, but yeah, it's a pretty wild story that, ended up working out in our favor.
I could even see that story being its own short film,
Yeah.
and the very ending is that reveal of the
Like I said,
card and
cue the Steven Soderbergh
yes.
music, and you
Yeah,
cut
and
back
then
to.
and then the final shot is you driving past the big sign that
Yeah.
you did not that you
Oh,
I
there's
guess the moral
there's the sign.
yeah, oh, there we go. Well, what
Yeah.
do you know?
Maybe that's a
I
good
guess the
idea,
moral
make a short of it someday.
yeah, absolutely. This has been fantastic. I wanted to give you a chance to just plug anything you wanna plug,
Sure.
let people know where they can find you online, what you're working on, anything you wanna share.
Yeah, I mean, I look, the big thing is I think anybody that has any kind of like ear to the ground recognizes that Hollywood's in a really tough state right now. And I think that, anytime I've ever had sort of frustration or struggles or anything like that, I really come back to what is in my control and was not in my control, right? And so what's in my control is to take some sort of action. What is that? Is that reading scripts on the blacklist? Is that writing something? Is that conceiving of something? Is that going and shooting a document? Whatever it is. The point is to start taking action towards something. And I think a big thing that filmmakers need to start thinking about is can they make their own stuff? And by that I mean features, because I think shorts can be nice and they're all well and good, but I think that if you were trying to launch your career as a director and a feature director at that, there's really the only way to really do it is with a feature. I think that shorts are so ubiquitous. Everybody has made one. It's really hard to stand out in that world. And it's not really an indication of your ability to handle a 2-hour story. So, like, the easiest way to do that is make a 2-hour story. But a lot of people are held back because they think they need money to do it, and they don't. And that's, again, going back to why I created the course. It was to demonstrate that you don't, because not only have I done it, I've done it now a couple times. And it's helped get me the jobs that have a lot more money. It's helped get me the jobs that got me into the DGA, and it's helped have people convinced that they should work with me because they know that they're going to get more bang for their buck. Even though now we have a couple $1 million budget, I'm going to be able to stretch that budget because I'm being smart. I'm smart about how to do it. So the course not only teaches you how to sort of like the tips and the tricks and things I've talked about here and other things for like producing something for a very low budget, but also it helps with the mindset of it all. Helps with sort of your sort of mental health around making movies and why you're making movies, and how to deal with rejection and how to approach this kind of stuff so that you ultimately are happier doing what you want to do. And it's been really cool because I've now had several students who have made features and had a lot of success with it. And, so really cool stuff is happening with a lot of the students in the course. And for people to, really start taking their production to the next level. Now, it's not really for beginners. If you don't know anything about filmmaking, it's not really the right course. There's other courses for that. This requires you to have some knowledge about how to make a movie because you're doing a lot of it yourself, but it gives you stuff like how to work with SAG, how to deal with permits or not deal with permits, how to sort of leverage relationships to get the things that you need to make this film. It does it in a respectful way. It doesn't do it. I had a lot of feedback from people when I started doing ads around it year or two ago, who were like, "Oh, you're just like not paying your crew," and I'm like, "I don't have a crew." Like, I'm not going to a DP and saying, "Come work for 2 weeks for no money." Like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm saying these directors should learn to DP their own stuff or find a friend that's willing to do it or not shoot 2 weeks consecutive, production. So, shoot on weekends or like whatever that is. So I find it really valuable. I wish I had it when I was making Layover, but now everybody else gets the benefit of that experience. And I also show how it can be applied to budgets as you grow and still become a better filmmaker. So that if you want to know more about the course, it's at 6kfilmmaker.com. It's $97. I mean, it's not even the cost of a class at a film school, and you're going to get a lot more out of it than you would, paying for film school. So, if there's anybody who feels like they're struggling to get a movie made, they're not getting to where they want to make their first feature, but they don't have a lot of money to do it, I'd highly recommend they check out the course.
It sounds great. That's awesome. Josh, really appreciate all your time and sharing all these stories. It's been great. I just really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I'm always happy to talk about this kind of stuff and share and help other people learn from my experience, because I think, like, I'm still close. I've been at this as a full-time director for 10 years, but the problem I had with a lot of the advice you would get when you'd hear about Spielberg and things like that is like, what? Like, Spielberg stuck on a lot. Like, nobody's doing that today. It's like you can't get away with that kind of stuff. The way they broke in no longer applies anymore. And I think the more you can hear from people that are like 5, 10 years out from sort of that break and how they kind of like did it, the better off, the more valuable that information is, because it's still relevant. Like, again, either whether it's today or 10 years from now, you know, making a $6,000 feature, I mean, it's probably whatever with inflation, but like making a $6,000 feature is still going to apply. It's still going to be relevant. I think it's almost even more relevant now, because if you could demonstrate an ability to create your own, for lack of a better term, content, you are valuable. You're more valuable than if you require other people to say yes to you making that content. So that the more you can be doing that, the better off you are. I'm still doing it. I've had a challenging couple of years after Mending the Line came out. I mean, suffered through 2 strikes and, a complete change in Hollywood in terms of what they're looking at, what they're funding. And, I started saying maybe I should just go make $100,000 feature, and just started writing one, and so I'm often just saying, how can I get back to just directing and getting on set and having that experience. And so if that means going and making a $50,000 movie or $100,000 movie, fine. Like, let's go do it. Soderbergh does it. He'll go make his big budget stuff, and he'll come and make a low budget thing, and it keeps you fresh. And it means you're never waiting on somebody else to give you permission.
Yeah, making your own opportunities.
Yeah,
Great.
man,
This
this
is
was
awesome.
great. I really appreciate you having me on, and hope it's beneficial to your listeners.
And that was my conversation with writer and director Joshua Caldwell. I really enjoyed the time that I spent with him. I'm so thankful he came on the show this month. I really could have listened to him share his experiences and his insights for a lot longer, and I hope you gained a lot from listening just as much as I did. If you want to subscribe to his newsletter over on Substack, you can find him at joshuacaldwelldirector.substack.com. That's where I was first introduced to him and his work. But if you'd also like to take a look at the 6K Filmmaker course that he talked a lot about during this episode, you can find that at 6kfilmmaker.com. That's the number 6, kfilmmaker.com. What I really enjoyed was listening to Joshua's insights about how to provide opportunities for yourself and not waiting for things to happen, not just producing a short, sending it out into the world, and then waiting for that phone call, but moving forward, taking the initiative and producing opportunities for yourself through the work. I think that really encapsulates a lot about what this podcast is about and within the stories that I'm trying to share. You can follow everything that I'm doing online at linktree.com/Clint Till. If you're interested in reading my personal stories about my own experiences, you can subscribe to my newsletter at clinttill.substack.com. And also, I'd love it if you would go on to Apple Podcasts, rate, review the show. That's how others will find it and help spread the word. This has been the Persistence of Vision podcast.